All right. Thank you, everyone, again so much for joining me today for this workshop on funding your art practice by Creative Careers at Art Center College of Design. My name is Eilish, and I'm one of the two career advisors with the Creative Careers team. And as mentioned, today we're going to be talking a little bit about funding your art practice independently and kind of finding some ways to feel financially stable while exploring your creative practice. So let's chat a little bit about our agenda for today. My goal for this session is really to provide kind of an overview of what arts funding is, some of the different models for art funding, how they differ, and what the application processes and kind of application of those funds may potentially look like to give everyone a bit of an understanding of where they may want to look further if they're interested in funding their own art practice. Then we'll talk about some resources that are available at Art Center, kind of outside of the Art Center community as well. And really, I want this to serve as a jumping off point for folks who are interested to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this subject and know where they can go for their next step if they're interested in exploring further, since this whole thing is going to be very individual and independent to each person's own creative pursuits. So let's get started with just a basic definition. What is arts funding? So arts funding, as we're going to talk about it today, is kind of a broad and umbrella term for a variety of different types of public and private sources for financial support for artists. So this can come from nonprofit organizations, it can come from federal and state government agencies, it can come from private sector companies, or it can come from individuals. So when we look at this whole scope of the different types of funding sources, I think it's really important to note that number one, there is a lot of different funding out there. Maybe that's something that you already knew, maybe it's something that you didn't, but there is a lot of funding options and they come from different places. And really, I think it's helpful to know that there is something for everybody out there. Depending on what your goals are and what specifically you'd be looking for funding for, you may find that a few of these types of funding sources are a great fit for you. Maybe only one of them is, or maybe all of them are. And really, I want to highlight that arts funding from these types of sources and in some of the ways that we're going to be chatting about shortly, it can be a really, really incredible way to meet your cost of living or to support yourself financially as a working artist and ensure that you have the time and the ability to work on projects that you're passionate about in the way that best fits into your life. So again, as we're going to be talking about, all of these funding models can be very, very different in terms of their duration, of what's expected of you. And because of that, as mentioned, there really is something for everybody. So let's talk a little bit about some of these options. I want to start out with grants or artist grants as an overall. So artist grants are sums of money that are given to artists to support their practice in a variety of different ways. So grants can be either given to individuals or to groups, and they can fund either a specific project or they can be used to cover expenses like rent, studio space, supplies, etc., to kind of alleviate some of that financial concern and allow you to concentrate on a specific project. You'll notice that this seems really broad, right? And that's kind of by design. There are so many different types of grants that have so many different specific requirements or expectations for grantees or applicants that you can really find a grant that fits exactly what you're looking for, whatever it is that you're looking for. So what's really important to consider is that there are a few different types of grants. There are going to be grants that are really restricted in terms of the type of funding that they offer and what that funding can be used for. For example, a grant may only be considered For example, emergency financial support that can be used on things like rent, food, utilities, etc., for those who are in a needs-based situation. Other restricted grants might exclusively be looking to fund studio supplies or rental space for a studio. An unrestricted grant is going to have far fewer expectations on specifically how you can use that money, although usually there still are expectations in place that you do have to meet. When we look at grants, we should also consider that there are kind of a variety of different types of demographics that a grant is looking to tap into, or different grants are looking to tap into. So some grants are need-based. As mentioned, they're going to be looking to provide financial support to those who are directly in need of that support. Again, that could be for things like rent, supplementing some of your living expenses to allow you to work on a project, while other grants are going to be awarded and more merit-based, where you kind of demonstrate a certain background or set of experiences in your creative practice, and the understanding or the assessment of the grants is really considered based on that merit. And then finally, there are also grants that are nomination based, that your faculty, your friends, the folks that are in your creative community can encourage you or nominate you for individually. And for those grants specifically, there's often an expectation that you are nominated before you even begin to submit your materials, and they will reach out directly to you to supply the application links, materials that they might need from you, etc. And then finally, the last thing that I want to highlight here is that some grants are going to be time-bound, as in there's an expectation that you will apply the grant or execute the grant within a certain period of time. Sometimes that might be a calendar year or 2 calendar years. And other grants are going to be completely open-ended, where they say, we just want you to utilize these funds that we have offered to you or that we are granting to you, and you can use it in your own time period. The most important thing to know about artist grants is that you're going to be expected to report back to your funder following the issue of the grant or the execution of the grant, ways in which the funds have been allocated and the ways in which your practice has been supported by those funds. This is really just a goal to have the awarding body make sure that their grants are being used in the ways that they have expected them to be used, so that they can report back to maybe their funders, their partner organizations, that the grants are being awarded as originally designed. The reason that I want to mention this is because sometimes we think, I've been awarded money, I get to use this money and then kind of finish my project and walk away. But with grants specifically, there is this expectation of slightly higher engagement. And I like to mention that in advance because for some folks, they realize that maybe that's not the right fit for them. It does require a little bit of logistics and administrative planning, and very often, again, generating of these reports in order to send to your grant funder. So that brings us to a little bit about what the application process looks like. Now, it is going to vary by the hosting or granting organization, but it might include things like an artist statement. That makes a lot of sense. A description of your creative journey, of how you got to where you are today, which might already be in your artist statement, but might be asked of you separately. Obviously, a presentation of your portfolio. And specifically as it relates to those reports I just mentioned, a budget proposal for the awarded funds. So how are you specifically going to utilize those funds in the best way, based on what the specific restrictions of the grant are, when they would be looking to award it, the time frame, etc. Your budget proposal is probably going to be one of the biggest pieces of your grant application process because it'll take a little bit of research and it'll take a little bit of work to align things all together. But it is a huge part of a successful application to have a well-written proposal that's well-researched. And then finally, a grant may also expect that you have confirmation of additional funding sources. This is to ensure that the project or the needs that they're funding will also be met in other ways. So, for example, if your grant that you're applying for, let's say, is for $5,000, and you estimate that a project may cost you a total of $8,000 to complete for supplies, for studio space, etc., you may need to provide evidence of how you will fund that additional $3,000 worth of cost. This can come from personal funding, it can come from additional grants, it can come from donors. But again, I do want to highlight that for some granting organizations, they are looking for folks who have secured additional sources of funding to ensure that a project will be seen to completion. Something else that is going to be a huge part of your application process is that you're going to want to review the types of projects or the types of artists that have been funded by a specific grant. So this could be recent grantees, it could be grantees from a few years ago. You may even look at the whole scope of grantees and who has been previously funded in these ways. This is for a variety of reasons, but specifically to make sure that your work, the needs that you are securing funding for are well aligned with the ways that this organization has previously awarded grants. So, for example, if you are applying for a grant for visual artists of all mediums, that is specifically looking to fund folks who are working on pieces or projects about climate change. You may want to take a look at and see how previous grantees have talked about climate change, what specific areas they've explored. Is there a way that your application or your proposal for the use of funds can add to the conversation that they're already building and make sure that it's still really well in line with the applicants or the grantees that have previously been awarded? Our next funding model, to kind of go through these in order, are fellowships. So fellowships are kind of like slightly more specific grants with a little bit more engagement expected. So fellowships are funded opportunities awarded to individual artists to support their creative practice. So while grants can be for individuals or groups, fellowships are usually awarded just to an individual artist. These are often relatively unrestricted and merit-based, unlike grants. So a fellowship is often awarded for folks who have demonstrated considerable impact in their field, a kind of shining star that has been recognized in other ways. And I like to think of fellowships as kind of like a prize or something to work towards in the long run. Now, a fellowship experience can be a variety of different times or lengths, but they usually tend to be slightly more long-term. They might be a few months to a year worth of time. And they often tend to come with a lot of professional development opportunities that are not necessarily baked into grants generally. So you might have access to things like mentorship, the opportunity to exhibit your work in a really specific way. Things like travel, if potentially your fellowship involves meeting or collaborating or training with others. And fellowships don't necessarily include a physical space to support your practice, although they might, depending on the fellowship. Now, I want to highlight these things because, again, depending on what you're looking for from funding, whether you're just looking for something like, being able to meet living expenses, or you're looking for a slightly more involved training and development opportunity, you might find that grants versus fellowships are going to be a better opportunity for you. An important thing to note about the fellowship application process, again, is that it's going to be varied by organization, but it's going to include an artist statement. And very specifically, it's going to include a demonstration of the impact of your work. So, as we mentioned, because these are very much merit-based and they are very much focused on those who have made an impact or who are, being change makers in their particular field of art or design, there is going to want to be kind of demonstrable impact or demonstrable evidence of that impact in your application materials. You're also likely going to be asked to provide professional references, again, because this is a merit-based opportunity. And of course, your portfolio. And much like I just mentioned, you're going to want to review the types of artists that have been previously awarded this fellowship, again, to make sure that you're in alignment with the types of fellows that have previously been awarded, the types of work that they do, how they talk about their work, the direction that their work follows, etc. This not only helps your application, but it also helps you decide if a particular fellowship is the right fit for you. And then finally, the last thing that I want to highlight are residencies. So a residency, or an artist in residence program, is a program that can offer space, facilities, and other professional development opportunities, for artists to create work, explore new ideas. And this often is designed to occur kind of outside of their usual context or their daily lives. So this can include access to things like studio space, specialty equipment that you may not have access to on a daily basis, mentoring or mentorship opportunities, and room and board. Residencies also often culminate in an opportunity for artists to exhibit their work, much like fellowships. Now, the thing about residencies that I really want to highlight here is that they are not all created equal, and each residency is going to have kind of slightly different expectations or structures that really focus on, again, what they're able to provide to individual artists based on the circumstances. So what does that look like? When choosing a residency, it's really important to consider the type of environment that you need to thrive in your creative practice. Some residencies may have really small groups of a few artists at a time, and other residencies may have much larger groups of artists. There may be an expectation that you work communally with other artists. For example, a residency may have, so to speak, like one of each type of artists, and you work together and you teach each other and you learn from each other. And other residencies may be much more solitary, where primarily you are working alone, you are engaging with your practice alone, and there isn't as much expectation of kind of collaboration or, cross medium conversations. Our residency is also going to differ widely in terms of the time frame expected. Some residencies may be 1 week long, and others may be a few months or up to a year. And the amount of time that you are expected to participate, or the amount of time that you have to participate, is really going to help you determine both if residencies are the right fit for you, as well as which ones are going to be the right fit for you. And then finally, costs or awarded funds associated. This is, I think, one of the most important things to highlight here, because while many residencies are fully or partially funded and may even include a stipend for artists awarded with the residency, there are other residencies that will actually charge you in order to participate in said residency. It's really a personal choice to decide if paying for a particular residency is the right fit for you, but please know that there are many, many opportunities that are fully funded and may even provide, as mentioned, um, a stipend for artists to participate while they're there. So consider, if you are looking at a specific residency that does require costs to attend, maybe what are the things that you like about that residency, and how can we find opportunities to get those exact same features or experiences or benefits, maybe in an experience that we don't have to actually pay for. And then, of course, we do want to just keep in mind the core values and the mission of the program and how well they align with our artistic practice as well. So much like areas like grants, or other kind of experiences associated with nonprofit organizations, you may find that some residencies have specific impact areas that they're looking to support. Those could be social impact, they could be environmental impact. They also may not involve an impact area at all. But for those that do, they may be looking at candidates for residency whose work either already exemplifies or is looking to exemplify those impact areas. Which brings us to our application, right? And again, not to repeat myself, but the application processes are going to vary by organization. They're going to include an artist statement, most likely, and your portfolio, and a description of your creative journey. And specific to residencies, they're going to ask why this residency specifically. What about the opportunity to be located in rural Maine speaks to you? What about the opportunity to travel to Paris and be an artist in residence in Paris speaks to you? And of course, a proposal of the work that you tend to explore while there. This is going to be important for all types of residencies, but especially for those that have that impact focus, where they're looking really to see how well artists are aligned with the type of impact that they're looking to achieve. This is also going to be really important for those types of residency situations where they're maybe looking to have kind of an accumulation of artists of different mediums who can all teach each other, learn from each other, and work together, because the work that you tend to explore while there may impact the type of work that another artist may intend to explore while they're on their residency as well. And of course, again, you're going to want to review the types of artists that have been in residence previously. Not only to determine, for example, that you are well aligned with the type of work that has previously been funded or previously been offered a spot in this particular case, but also because it can give you an understanding of the type of follow-up experience that something like a residency has offered to a particular artist. Because residencies can often come, as mentioned, with things like mentorship, training, access to additional equipment, and opportunity to exhibit your work, it can be a really, really amazing way to get in front of a new audience, get new eyes or a new group of people to see your work and potentially build either a client base of customers, interest in showing your work at exhibitions elsewhere, etc. And if that's something that you're particularly interested in as it relates to finding a residency, I would really recommend researching artists who have previously been in residence at a specific residency and what they've gone on to do since then. Were they able to make use of those opportunities that were given to them? And what did that lead to after the fact? Or maybe did they get promised a lot of things and the residency didn't end up, creating a lot of opportunity for them, which can also potentially happen. And then the last thing that I just want us to think about overall as part of our application process is the fact that because residencies can be very, very unique in their structure, you're going to want to do research about things including what do they offer for room and board? Do they offer room and board? Do I have access to a space that is well equipped, or is it just a space and I will have to supply my own supplies of various sources? Some residencies may literally offer you a room with nothing in it in order to work on your practice. And some residencies will have much more existing equipment, folks to train you on that equipment, and again, kind of holistic support in your creative journey for that, the length and the duration of that residency. So really important to do your research in advance. So I want to just highlight a couple of big picture wrap-up areas before we kind of move on to some resources, some ways that you can engage with some of these things, and maybe some steps that you want to take following this presentation today. So first and foremost, identifying your best match. We've talked a little bit about these three different funding areas, grants, fellowships, and residencies. Some of the ways that they are different, some of the ways that they are the same or similar. And as mentioned, each opportunity provides different kind of pros and cons, depending on what your goals are, what you're looking to have funded, and the amount of time that you have to dedicate to a particular funding opportunity. So really thinking about what it is that you would like to be funded and how you would like to engage with that is going to help you identify your best match. For example, if you were looking to be awarded money, but not necessarily looking to have to report back and do budget spreadsheets and run data reports and things like that, then certain types of grants may not be the right fit for you. If you're looking to really be in a kind of secluded private environment to explore your creative practice, there may be certain residency opportunities that may be awesome, but just not the right fit for you to thrive creatively. So identifying that best fit and doing some research there is going to be really, really impactful. The next step, of course, here, make sure that you research the awarding body. The person or the organization or the group who is funding whatever it is that you are applying for is going to be really, really instrumental, of course, in selecting who is approved for that grant, fellowship, or residency. So this means not only understanding who they've previously awarded to, but also what are their organizational goals? What do they like to see with these types of grants? And how can you support them in their organizational goals by accepting this opportunity or being awarded this opportunity? Of course, know that you can get support with your application. I'm going to talk about some ways to do this in just a minute, but make sure that as you are going through this process, you're getting support in writing your applications to any of these methods. You may find that you apply for a grant or a residency or multiple fellowships, what have you, and you do not get offers immediately. You do not get awarded things immediately, and that's okay. These opportunities can be highly competitive, but getting support with your application, getting feedback, getting suggestions, and continuing to work through the process is going to be really instrumental in having a successful application to any of these things. And then finally, don't forget the expectations, right? This goes right back to our first point here of identifying your best match. Don't forget what will be expected of you in this experience. Don't forget what you need to thrive, but also don't forget what this company needs, or this organization, or this private donor, or this government agency needs in order to feel that their award has been successfully dispersed, or their residency has been successfully fulfilled. Keeping these things in mind ensures not only that you have a great experience, but that you're able to create a successful application. And funnily enough, the more opportunities that you are accepted into in these areas, the more grants that you receive, fellowships, residencies, etc., the more likely it is that you are to be awarded future opportunities following this fact. This is kind of the reality of a lot of different application-based experiences, that the more experience you have in these areas, the more likely it is to be accepted to other areas in the future. So don't forget those expectations, and be really kind of honest with yourself about how much you're able to meet those expectations for any individual experience. This really creates the best opportunity for success on both ends, because it is going to be a two-way street. So really quickly, let's talk about some resources at Art Center. First and foremost, to kind of plug our own tools here, you're welcome to schedule an appointment with Creative Careers. We as a department are able to support you in applications for things like grants and fellowships and residencies. And we would really, really love to chat you through the process and kind of what those application materials are really looking for. We can also help you figure out a search strategy or a research strategy if you're interested in these areas but aren't sure where to get started. Because again, it is so individual, this process of finding the right funding for you and your creative practice, that we would love to meet with you and chat through it more in depth. You can and should also reach out to the Writing Center. The Writing Center is an amazing tool, an amazing support network for folks who are just looking to have an additional set of eyes on those application materials. Like I mentioned, feedback and ensuring that your application materials are strong and communicating the things that you need them to is going to be hugely instrumental in successful grant applications. And reaching out to the Writing Center to have them review, to have them give feedback, to check in and say, is this really communicating what I want it to, is going to be really, really beneficial. And the last area that I want to highlight here is checking in with your faculty and alumni, right? We have an amazing network at Art Center of faculty who are working in our industry, of faculty who know folks working in our industry, and of alumni at Art Center who have had amazing experiences before us. We even have alumni in this Zoom room with us today, which is amazing. There are so many faculty at Art Center and so many alum who have heard of, have interacted with, have previously applied to some of these funding opportunities that we're curious about. Maybe our faculty have some inside info about somebody who has previously applied and been awarded that grant. Maybe we find an alumni who has previously applied for or been awarded that grant. Or that fellowship or that residency, insert experience here. Reaching out to folks to let them know, I'm really interested in doing this thing. I would love to know if you have heard of anybody who's explored it before. Do they have any references or recommendations for me? Do you have any references or recommendations for me? Even reaching out to let them know, I'm really interested in this, and I'm wondering if you would be open to writing me a recommendation letter for this fellowship that I'm applying to, or this grant that I'm applying for, because I need a reference. Can be really, really, really beneficial. And tapping into that community, that support network, to let them know, I'm interested in this, I'm not exactly sure where to get started, may give you even more resources, more directions, and more bodies of information to explore than you could imagine. The other resource that I want to highlight that you can explore on your own if you're interested is The Artist's Guide to Grant Writing by Gigi Rosenberg. I've read this book in preparation for this workshop and in general, in my kind of goal to support Art Center students in this way. There are copies of it available through the Art Center library anytime that you would like to check them out. And this is a really, really amazing guide for really breaking down what goes into a grant application. And while all grant applications are different, and while they are not exactly the same as applications for fellowships or for residencies, the principle of being able to communicate who you are, what you do, and why this opportunity is a good fit for you does remain the same. It also presents a really, really fantastic overview of how to find different types of funding sources. Again, different types of grants, different types of fellowships, and kind of takes you through what that research process can look like. Again, that is something that CPD is here to support you with, to explore with you anytime that you would like to. But if you'd like to explore this on your own as well, this book is a really fantastic guide, and it's available at the library. So with that, I'm going to take a minute now. I'm going to leave up my contact information here, and I'm going to stop recording. I wanted to leave some additional time at the end of this workshop